Right now, in hidden facilities buried beneath Chinese industrial zones, a silent revolution is underway. One that could render America's semiconductor sanctions obsolete. For years, the US has tightened its grip on China's access to advanced chips, banning NVIDIA GPUs, cutting off TSMC exports, and choking Beijing's AI ambitions. But what if I told you China has spent the last 18 months building a shadow semiconductor empire? One that's not just surviving US restrictions, but thriving in spite of them. Today, we expose the secret chip factories, the smuggling networks, and the reverse engineering schemes that could shift the balance of power in the tech war forever. This isn't just about chips. It's about who controls the future. And China is playing to win. Welcome to the front lines of the hardware war. By now, you've heard about the US-China semiconductor standoff. The export controls, the NVIDIA bans, the TSMC restrictions, all designed to cripple China's tech rise. But here's what the mainstream media isn't telling you: those sanctions? They're failing. In 2026, China isn't just adapting to the chip blockade. It's systematically dismantling it. And the weapons it's using? Smuggled GPUs, stolen blueprints, and a network of underground factories so secretive, even US intelligence is struggling to track them. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Beijing's most audacious tech gambit yet. This is the story of how China is building a semiconductor industry in the shadows, and why the US might already be too late to stop it. Let us start with the most shocking revelation: China's underground chip factories. These aren't your typical semiconductor plants. We're talking about facilities hidden in repurposed military bunkers, abandoned factories, and even high-security industrial parks with layers of misdirection. Satellite imagery from 2026 shows at least 12 such sites across China, each designed to evade US surveillance. How? By operating under the guise of legacy chip production, officially making outdated 28 nanometers or 40 nanometers chips, while secretly churning out 7 nanometers and even 5 nanometers AI accelerators. The trick? They're using a technique called split manufacturing. Front-end processes like lithography and etching happen in plain sight, often in facilities owned by state-backed firms like SMIC or Huahong. But the back end? The critical steps like packaging and testing? Those are outsourced to smaller, off-the-books facilities, often in provinces like Jiangsu or Guangdong, where local governments turn a blind eye. The result? Chips that look like they're from 2020, but perform like they're from 2026. And the US? It has no idea how to regulate what it can't see. But how is China getting the tools to build these chips? After all, the US has banned the export of advanced semiconductor equipment like ASML's EUV lithography machines to China. The answer? Smuggling. Not the kind you're thinking of. This isn't suitcase is full of GPUs crossing borders. It's a sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar network that exploits loopholes in US export controls. Here's how it works. Step 1. China identifies dual-use equipment machines that can be used for both civilian and military purposes, like older DUV lithography tools. Step 2. They route these purchases through shell companies in countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, or even the UAE, nations that aren't bound by US sanctions. Step 3. They disassemble the machines, ship them in pieces, and reassemble them in China. And Step 4? They modify them. Chinese engineers have found ways to tweak older ASML machines to achieve near EUV precision. It's not perfect, but it's enough to produce chips that can compete with NVIDIA SA100 in certain AI workloads. And the craziest part? The US knows this is happening. In 2025, the Commerce Department blacklisted over 50 Chinese firms for smuggling semiconductor equipment. But in 2026? The list has grown to over 200. The smuggling isn't stopping. It's accelerating. Now, let us talk about the elephant in the room, TSMC. The Taiwanese giant is the crown jewel of the semiconductor world, producing over 50% of the world's advanced chips. And China wants its secrets badly. In 2026, US intelligence reports reveal that Chinese operatives have infiltrated TSMC's supply chain at every level, from equipment vendors to logistics partners. But the most brazen move? The theft of TSMC's 3 nanometers process blueprints. In late 2025, a group of Chinese engineers posing as employees of a TSMC subcontractor managed to exfiltrate terabytes of data on TSMC's most advanced node. That data is now being used in China's secretive Project Phoenix, a state-backed effort to replicate TSMC's 3nm process by 2027. And they're closer than you think. Leaked documents show that China's leading foundry, SMIC, has already achieved 7nm yields of over 90%, a feat that was thought impossible without EUV machines. How? By combining stolen TSMC data with a technique called multi-patterning, where older DUV machines perform multiple exposures to achieve finer resolution. It's slower, it's less efficient, but it works. And if SMIC cracks 5nm or even 3nm? The US's entire semiconductor strategy collapses. But here's the twist: China doesn't even need to match TSMC or NVIDIA to win this war. Because in 2026, Beijing is playing a different game, one that exploits the US's obsession with cutting-edge tech. While America focuses on banning 7nm and below, China is weaponizing older nodes. Case in point, the legacy chip loophole. The US has left a gaping hole in its sanctions by allowing the export of chips made on 28nm or older processes. Why? Because these chips are used in everything from cars to washing machines, industries the US doesn't want to disrupt. But China is turning this loophole into a weapon. In 2026, Chinese firms are flooding the market with cheap, high-performance 28nm chips that can be used in everything from military drones to AI inference engines. And because they're technically legacy, they're not subject to US export controls. The result? China is building an entire ecosystem of good enough chips that undercut NVIDIA and AMD in price and availability. And the US? It's stuck in a dilemma: tighten the loophole and risk global supply chain chaos, or leave it open and let China dominate the low end of the market where most of the world's computing still happens. So, what is the US doing to counter this? The short answer: not enough. In 2026, Washington is still playing catch-up. The CHIPS Act, passed in 2022, is finally starting to bear fruit, with Intel and TSMC ramping up US production. But it's a drop in the bucket compared to China's shadow industry. The Biden administration has also expanded the entity list, blacklisting more Chinese firms. But every time the US adds a company to the list, two more pop up to take its place. And then there's the diplomatic front. The US is pressuring allies like the Netherlands and Japan to tighten their own export controls. But here's the problem: those countries have economic interests in China. ASML, for example, still generates 15% of its revenue from Chinese customers. And Japan's Tokyo Electron? Over 20%. These firms aren't going to cut off China entirely. So, the US is left with a choice: escalate the sanctions and risk a global tech split, or accept that China is building a parallel semiconductor industry, one that might soon rival the West's. This brings us to the climax of our story: what happens if China succeeds? The implications are staggering. If China cracks 3nm or even 5nm at scale, it could flood the market with AI chips that undercut NVIDIA's dominance. We're talking about a world where Chinese data centers run on homegrown GPUs, where Huawei's Ascend chips power the next generation of AI models, and where the US's semiconductor sanctions become irrelevant. But it's not just about AI. A self-sufficient China could dominate industries from electric vehicles to 5G infrastructure. And the geopolitical fallout? Imagine a world where Taiwan's TSMC is no longer the linchpin of global tech. Where the US's military edge built on superior chips erodes. Where China's Made in China 2025 plan isn't just a slogan, but a reality. This isn't a distant scenario. It's a 2026 reality. And the clock is ticking. So, what can the US do? The first step is admitting that the current strategy isn't working. Sanctions alone won't stop China. The US needs a multi-pronged approach: invest heavily in next-gen chip tech, like 2nm and beyond, to stay ahead. Strengthen alliances with Japan, South Korea, and the EU to close loopholes in export controls. And most importantly, disrupt China's smuggling networks, not just by blacklisting firms, but by targeting the financial systems that enable them. But here's the hard truth: the window to act is closing. China's secret chip factories aren't a future threat. They're a present reality. And if the US doesn't adapt, it risks losing the semiconductor war before it even realizes the battle has shifted. This is the hardware war of our time. A war where the stakes aren't just market share, but global dominance. And right now, China is executing a plan that could redefine the tech landscape for decades. The question is, will the US wake up in time? If you found this investigation eye-opening, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the semiconductor war, and let me know in the comments, do you think the US can still stop China's shadow chip empire? The future of tech is being written today. And the next chapter? It's up to us to decide how it ends.